What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Now, I saw this earlier, but I wanted to get all my NBA videos out the way before I spoke on this. And that is the passing of one of the greatest players in Major League Baseball history. That being Tom Seaver, who was the greatest Met of all time. You know, all due respect to Darryl Strawberry and, Keith Hernandez and Cleon Jones and all of those guys, Dwight Gooden. But the greatest and most dominant player by far in that franchise's history was Tom Seaver. He died earlier this week from complications due to Lewy body dementia, the same illness that was affecting Robin Williams when he committed suicide. He also suffered from complications from Lyme disease, and also he suffered, I believe I saw, he was suffering from COVID-19. He was first diagnosed with Lewy body dementia last year. And, Tom Seaver had been suffering from neurological issues for some time, but initially it was believed it was because of complications from Lyme disease. And, you can acquire Lyme disease from tick bites. But Tom Seaver, he was, of course, a Hall of Famer. At the time that he was inducted back in 1992, he received nearly 99% of all votes cast. And since then, only a handful of players have exceeded his percentage. Only Ken Griffey Jr., Derek Jeter, and Mariano Rivera have received a higher percentage of the ballot votes than Tom Seaver. He was also a 3-time Cy Young Award winner. Off the top of my head, the only guy that had more was Roger Clemens with, I believe, 7. But, Roger Clemens had his career prolonged chemically. So, as great as he is, you got to look at some of his numbers with a grain of salt. He was the 1967 National League Rookie of the Year, and he was the leader of the 1969 Miracle Mets. He had the poise of a savvy veteran on that team, and during that postseason run, that you seldom see from a young star. Tom Seaver is one of only 10 pitchers in Major League Baseball history with both 300 wins and 3,000 strikeouts. And he is 7th all-time in career strikeouts. When he retired, he was 3rd all-time behind Nolan Ryan and I believe Steve Carlton. But, behind Roger Clemens. Yeah, Roger Clemens and Steve Carlton. But since then, I think he's been passed by, Randy Johnson, Roger Clemens, and some other guys. He was selected by the Braves in the now defunct secondary draft in 1966, but irregularities with his contract led then Commissioner William Eckert to void the deal and put Seaver in a lottery with 3 teams, at the time being the Cleveland Indians, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Mets, willing to match Atlanta's signing bonus offer. The Mets won the lottery and ended up with the best pitcher of his generation. And that was a generation that included guys like himself and the Negro Brothers and Gaylord Perry and, who else was playing? Who else was a pitcher at that time? Steve Carlton, Jim Palmer, Nolan Ryan, Burt Brelevin, a lot of great pitchers. I saw a ridiculous comment the other day on a video that I was looking at with Dick Allen. I've been very interested in Dick Allen recently because I really do believe he should be in the Hall of Fame. When you look at the era he played in, and you look at some of the guys who have been, voted into the Hall recently, Hall of Fame recently, like if I'm not mistaken, Jim Rice was a very good player, but he wasn't as good, nor was he as dominant in his peak as Dick Allen, nor was he as talented as Dick Allen, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't Harold Baines get in? Let me check that up right quick. Let me check that up, because I thought I remember some talk about Harold Baines getting into the Hall, or that he might be a Hall of Famer, or he was close to it. Yeah, Harold Baines is in the Hall of Fame, and I'm not knocking him, man, but I don't get it. This is why I look at Major League Baseball in a certain way, man. Like, Harold Baines was a really good player, but Harold Baines to me was not a Hall of Famer. No. If you're going to put these guys in, then you got to put in the Dick Allens, you know what I'm saying, and some of those other guys that played back in that era. And then, you're looking at Roger Clemens, and you're looking at Barry Bonds, you're looking at Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Rafael Palmeiro. And yeah, I understand these guys did do some stuff, man. But at the end of the day, if you're going to put in Harold Baines, but you're going to keep these guys out, you're going to keep, what's his name? Pete Rose out. Whatever. But to me, Tom Seaver, not only was he the best pitcher of his generation, he was probably a top, honestly, talent for talent. You could argue that he's a top 2 to 3 pitcher of all time. Because a lot of those guys, Walter Johnson, those guys that are really heavily regarded, Cy Youngs, Walter Johnson, Grover Cleveland Alexander, Christy Mathewson, a lot of those guys dominated in the dead ball era, okay, where guys weren't swinging for home runs. Yeah, you give them credit because these guys, didn't have these platoons to help them out, so they played complete games. These guys' arms were totally fucking dead by the time they were 35 years old. But at the same time, they didn't have to worry about the Reggie Jacksons and, the Dick Allens and, the Gorman Thomases and, the Norm Cashes. I'm talking about guys that played in his era when he pitched, Tom Seaver, the sluggers and the hitters. He didn't have to worry about these guys. He didn't have to worry about, the Paul Molitors and the George Bretts and, he didn't have, back in the dead ball era, yeah, they had some guys that could hit, but they didn't have guys that could hit like that back then. They didn't have guys that could hit for power like they did starting in Tom Seaver's era. And this guy pitched all the way into the 80s. You had to worry about, toward the end of his career, you started having to worry about guys like who was coming of age in the mid-1980s as far as hitters are concerned. You had to worry about, some of these up-and-coming power guys like Darryl Strawberry, like I mentioned. Well, Darryl Strawberry's on this team. I can't mention him. But, it was guys, I can't think of anybody. Who's some of the... Oh, like guys like Dwight and Darrell Evans. For some reason, it's like when I think of I can think of hitters from the 70s, and I can think of hitters from the mid to late 80s, but for some reason when I think of the early 80s, I fog. Like, the only guy I can think of is Reggie. But who were some of the top hitters in there? Let me think for a second. I'm just thinking of the top hitters in the early... Well, you had Jim Rice, you had Reggie Jackson, you had Tony Armas. I said Darrell Evans, Dwight Evans. Who were some of the other good hitters? Tony Gwynn was coming up. Jesse Barfield. I think he was with the Toronto Blue Jays, at the time. Jesse Barfield. There's a lot of guys back then. I wouldn't say there was a premier, like, slugger, but there were a lot of good actual hitters. Robin Yount is another one. Now I'm starting to think of guys. You know, I guess my computer was in my head was cycling. Now it's starting to come out. But anyway, yeah, you get the idea, man. Tom Seaver had to pitch against upper echelon talent that some of these other guys didn't have to go against, you know, and he dominated like he was a pitcher from that era, you know. Ridiculous career ERA. Led the league in strikeouts, even though he wasn't a power pitcher. Led the league in, I think it was, what was it, strikeouts to walks per inning or something like that. He led the league in some weird categories for a guy that wasn't a power pitcher. And that's why he was nicknamed Tom Terrific. And for a decade at least, he was the premier pitcher in Major League Baseball history. And I also believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he had the strikeout record for a number of years before it was broken by Roger Clemens. I think it was him that had 19 strikeouts. And I think he did it twice. So, you know, yeah, this guy was a very dominating pitcher. You know what I'm saying? I know in modern baseball we think of guys like Randy Johnson, of course, and Pedro Martinez and Curt Schilling and, you know, a lot of other guys. Right now, you know, the Mets have Jacob deGrom. There's other great pitchers right now in Major League Baseball. But this guy right here is a stuff of legends. And today, Major League Baseball lost. Well, actually, he died a couple of days ago. It was just announced today. But Major League Baseball lost a true legend. And 2020 continues to shit on all of us collectively. So, tell me what you guys think.